Ding-a-ling-ling, is that the ad bell?
Oh, goodness me, he's ringing again.
What is he ringing for, Luke?
He's ringing for SCI GUYS Live in London.
You mean at Jamboree, which is near King's Cross, which is in London?
It's in London, and it's live, and it's a Jamboree, and it's SCI GUYS.
Is it just the SCI GUYS, or is there a special guest?
The special guest is Chanel Williams, our very good friend.
You mean it's Shan Wills on TikTok, Instagram, and potentially other places also?
It's starting to feel like you know everything I'm about to say.
That's because I wrote it all. I'll tell you what else is on there, Luke. The fact that we've got a live podcast, a Q&A, a quickfire quiz, and a meet and greet. Isn't that fun?
Yes, and Corey's also written that you can get your tickets now at sciguys.co.uk/tickets.
Did I write that that's sciguys.co.uk/tickets?
You did, so get your tickets now. The show is in less than 1 month, and a 20% discount is available for our patrons.
Oh boy, you'd better get them now before they all go. And speaking of going, we're going into the show now. It's not started yet, but it's about to.
Off we go.
Woo! Hello and welcome to the SCI GUYS, the show where we talk about the crazy, weird and wonderful stories from the science world. I'm Corey, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the licking Luke Cutforth. Horrid. This week we're talking about... You know what, I'll figure out a pun later. But first... We've got a Spotify update.
Oh, tell me more. Tell me more.
Like, does he have a car? He doesn't, but he has over 100,000 listeners and over 47,597 followers on Spotify.
Blimey, that's more people than I can imagine in a room.
Really? Well, it depends how big the room is.
I still can't imagine 47,000 people in one room, no matter how big the room is.
I've also got a question for everyone who's listening or watching. And look, I know your answer to this question already. The question is... Are you a procrastinator?
I've done about 20 YouTube videos on procrastination in my career.
You've done about 20 videos in your YouTube career. It took you 5 years to finish a bloody film, mate. If you want to answer that question, head down to the comments on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple or wherever, get to the YouTube comments or get to Spotify even. And why not follow us there too? And follow us on Apple. Look, I'm going to stop plugging and just get into the procrastination thing. So my first question for you, Luke, after that first question I've just asked is, what is procrastination?
So I would say it is when you have a task you're supposed to be doing, and instead of doing that task, you do other tasks that are helping you put off your initial task.
Yeah. So I have got a few different definitions of procrastination, and I've just smooshed them all together to make this one. Procrastination is just voluntarily delaying a necessary task, avoidance of work or necessary tasks, often by focusing on more satisfying activities, despite an expectation that one will be worse off for the delay.
I take issue with the word voluntarily.
Yes, that makes sense. A few people also take issue with the word voluntarily. In fact, I don't even know if you can say it's voluntary. It's kind of used in a weird-ish way. What it kind of means there, I think, is more actively, as in, as you were saying, doing other things to put it off. You know, so for example, I've got a big deadline coming. I need to research all of these SCI GUYS episodes. Guess all my washing is going to be done. Hey, look, have you ever noticed that every single time you come to record a SCI GUYS episode, there's washing hanging up? Have you ever noticed that?
I actually haven't noticed that. Is that really the case?
That is very much the case. My washing gets so done whenever you come around to do SCI GUYS.
You're so welcome. Let me know if you ever need clothes. I'll arrange a SCI GUYS date.
Honestly, it builds up, and then SCI GUYS comes around, and I'm like, well, now's the best time to do that, clearly.
That's actually very interesting. I recently listened to a podcast by someone who used to be in like the CIA, and he was talking about how in the CIA, now, again, this is a podcast, so it's not necessarily actual... I don't know the credibility of this source, but they're talking about how you essentially have like a saturation. When you've got a certain number of tasks you have to do, there's a level at which you are saturated and you can't take on another task, and you should consider yourself saturated a couple of tasks before that. And if you find yourself saturated, you should get one of the tasks done that is like the easiest or quickest task to do, because then you have less tasks and you're less saturated. So in some ways, like if you're saturated with like, I need to organize 5 SCI GUYS episodes and edit a SCI GUYS episode and upload something and oh god, all that, getting your washing done takes one thing off the list and you have a slightly clearer mind.
Yeah, so I mean, that's actually a tactic that I had to really, really work on picking up, and we'll get more into it later on as to why that is. But a little bit more about procrastination now. As we said, it's basically kind of delaying necessary tasks, even though you know it's going to not be so good for you, right? And that's kind of key there. It's delaying something that's necessary that's going to cause a sort of negative outcome for you. So delaying something that doesn't really matter, like, oh, I put off reorganizing a drawer, and also I barely ever use the drawer, and if I do reorganize the drawer, it's not really going to change my life all that much, right? Like, that does that really come under procrastinating? It's just kind of putting something off, right? Procrastinating, in the literature at least, it seems to be kind of defined quite specifically as putting off necessary tasks or unnecessarily delaying a task. So delaying a task for a reason, like a good actual reason that's going to be somewhat beneficial, is not necessarily procrastination, right? For example, right, if I want to research a SCI GUYS episode, but I'm like, actually, I know that this paper is about to be published, like released to the public in about a week's time, and that's going to probably be kind of a linchpin in this episode. I will wait. I'll just wait till then to do it. That wouldn't be procrastinating. That's a valid reason to put something off, right?
You tell yourself that.
You shut your mouth, Luke. An estimated 20% of adults regularly procrastinate. I'll repeat that for you, Luke. An estimated 20% of adults regularly procrastinate.
It's me. I'm 20% of adults.
And studies estimate that about all students engage in procrastination at some point, but about somewhere between 50 to 75% of students do it very regularly, to the point where it kind of is a bit of a problem, right? This is all self-reported, by the way, so it's estimates and it's self-reported, so there's a little bit of wiggle room there, right? Obviously, someone saying, yeah, I procrastinate a lot. You could have someone in there who's like, like those rich people that say, oh, I'm so skint, and they have hundreds of pounds just in their bank account and wallet at all times. I say hundreds of pounds in their bank account. That could still be skint. Hundreds of pounds in the wallet.
Loaded. God, what are they worrying about? Hundreds of pounds. Goodness me. Get some perspective, mate.
But it's like those rich friends that you've got that are saying, I'm so skint, and they're not actually skint. They're just fake skint. You know, they're like LARPing being poor. So yeah, it's what I mean to say there is that these sort of reports on procrastination take some of it with a little bit of a grain of salt, because again, it is self-reported and there are so many different factors that can come into people's perceptions of all of this.
Interestingly, on what you said, I procrastinated university as a student so hard that I quit university, became a YouTuber, and made a film.
And how long did it take you to make that film, Luke?
I then procrastinated that. No, I didn't. I didn't procrastinate that. It was just really flipping hard. But that's very funny.
Screw this uni mess. I'm going to make a film. 2 years after you'd have finished uni, you're still making It was a good film, though.
Give me a break.
It was worth it. You've had a good break. Had 5. No. So procrastination. Do you know the etymology of the word?
So you got pro. So that's like active, forward, towards, forward.
Yeah.
Crastinus.
It's from the Latin.
I only did Latin for a year, I'm afraid. So, just tell me the definition, Corey. Put us out of our misery.
So crass meaning tomorrow, crastinus belonging to tomorrow, like of tomorrow, and then forward, pro forward. So procrastinare is sort of to put something
into
forward tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, basically putting something off. I love that, by the way.
That's fascinating.
It's brilliant. So procrastinate comes from the Latin, basically meaning quite literally, I'll do it tomorrow, man.
Akai, but not in the new. Sorry, Akai in the new, I think.
Akai know the new.
Akai know the new.
I want to talk a little bit more about procrastination research. So I've already said, that kind of a lot of it is sort of based on self-reporting, which is not necessarily, I'm not saying that's inherently a bad thing, but there are some sort of biases and I guess sort of errors that are inherent to that we need to be aware of, right? And there's actually a great paper that I found, what research has been conducted on procrastination, evidence from a systemical bibliometric analysis. That's from 2022 in Frontiers in Psychology, I believe. Go ahead and check that one out. It's very readable, even if you don't really read papers usually. But yeah, basically what it sort of says is it just goes through the bulk of procrastination studies from the sort of 90s to now-ish. Well, then, but basically now, the 2020s, 1990s to 2020s, to see kind of what's going on there. And essentially what I've said already, that it's a lot on students. A lot of it is on students, and we still need to sort of diversify outwards. A lot of it was on personality types. So do you know the big 5 personality types? We spoke about those in our episode on the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Test, MBTI.
When you say big 5 personality, do you mean the big 5 personality traits?
Yeah, big 5 personality traits. Yeah. A lot of the research was looking at sort of the personality traits that were sort of indicative or related to procrastination.
Like conscientiousness.
Yeah, whereas more research is kind of, I think, shifting now, or we kind of want it to shift more towards the sort of environmental causes of procrastination and things like that. There's also been studies on how it affects health and whatnot. But yeah, there's also not been any really sort of longitudinal studies. Do you know what a longitudinal study is?
When you do it over like a lifetime.
Not necessarily over a lifetime, but over a period.
Very long time.
Yeah, over a period. Well, over a period of time, rather than sort of at a sort of point. Basically what it says here is, however, the predominant use of self-reported data collection and for a certain point in time rather than longitudinal designs has limited the validation of some conclusions. Basically what that's saying there is, we've got a lot of data and a lot of conclusions that we've drawn from studies that ask people, hey, what do you think about yourself at this current moment? We don't have a lot of data that is more sort of other people observing procrastinators over a period of time, right? And so we can't necessarily say the conclusions that we've drawn from the current body of work are 100% certain. We can never say that a conclusion is 100% certain, of course, but there's a level of uncertainty there that would be sort of mitigated somewhat by looking at people over time and not necessarily just taking their word for it in the moment, if that makes sense. So that's just a broad look at the sort of research on procrastination. I wanted to get that out of the way first so that you bear that in mind for everything we're about to say from now on. It's based a lot of it on self-reporting, on sort of point studies. So that's what we're looking at there, right? So we could be wrong about some of these things. There could be things that we're missing. There could be, there could be anything going on that is outside of the sort of view of these studies, right? So my next question for you, Luke, is why do we procrastinate? Why do you think we procrastinate?
Okay, so interestingly, I have had a book on my to-read list for a very long time, which, funnily enough, I have procrastinated reading.
Oh, love that one.
Which is about reframing the idea of laziness or procrastination. Now, having not read the full book, I may get things wrong.
Well, probably, yeah. Almost definitely.
Very funny. But I think the general point it's making is that when you are doing something that makes you look, quote, lazy or procrastinating, you're really avoiding feelings, right? So you're moving away from feelings that you don't want to feel and towards alternate feelings that you maybe are more willing to feel. You might not want to feel them, but you would prefer to feel them over the ones that you're avoiding.
Do you know the name of this book?
Lazy Doesn't Exist, or...
Who wrote it?
Laziness Doesn't Exist, Devon Price, I think.
I think I've kind of come across that whilst I've been reading. There's a few sort of books and papers on this, the topic of, and articles as well, the topic of laziness. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because laziness is a really weird concept, right? People will often, when they're talking about procrastination, try to stress that it's not laziness, because laziness is kind of like an inactivity, right? Laziness, if we're going to look up the sort of dictionary definition of lazy, right? What does lazy mean? It's unwilling to work or use energy, right? But procrastination isn't necessarily that, because you're doing things to avoid doing the thing that you need to do, right? Laziness would be almost avoiding work entirely out of just not wanting to do work. But as you've so correctly pointed out, based on the sort of data and what I've read here, yeah, procrastination doesn't come necessarily from a desire to not work. It comes from a more emotional standpoint. Do you know any more about that?
Well, I think the general thing I understand it to be is like when you are observing somebody else's behavior, you don't have access to their internal state, right? So you're trying to infer their internal state from their behavior.
Well, you don't, yeah.
Okay, mind reader.
Yeah.
I'll try and incorporate that into my understanding of the world then.
What a lovely compliment you just thought about me, Luke. Thank you.
I didn't think anything of the sort. And you bloody well know it. Anyway, so you're trying to guess someone's internal state from their external behavior, right? And essentially laziness is like, to quote one of Corey's favorite people ever, a low resolution view of reality, which I love as a phrase, even though we don't like the guy that much.
That's a good, great phrase. One of the best things this terrible dude has come up with.
Anyway, so you're trying to guess the internal state of the other person. The person's not doing the thing they're supposed to be doing, and you're trying to infer why. And kind of in my opinion, like the stupidest way of making sense of that is this person is deliberately not doing it. You're inferring intent and like consciousness. It's like a theory of mind thing, but like really dumb version of theory of mind.
You know, I would put this sort of concept of laziness in a similar category as, you know, how people view children, right? People view children as being like naughty and bad and just, you know, like little troublemakers. And I feel like that sort of mindset, it's something that we're starting to move away from a little bit. I mean, you see gentle parenting, you know, treating children like people, just little people that can't regulate themselves all that well because their brains aren't fully developed yet, you know, rather than...
Well, they should get a move on then, Corey. Bloody hell.
Well, look, exactly. But that getting a move on means helping them do that because they can't do it all by themselves. Their brains aren't all there yet.
If you leave them long enough, they'll figure out how to do it.
Or they'll be traumatized. But, you know, 50-50, right?
Sure.
80-20.
Well, let's run the experiment and find out.
No. You could do that with your... No, don't even do that
I'm
with your...
I'm not going to do that with my child.
Because I can't be the fun uncle for like and doing that, man. Can't be fun uncle and surrogate dad to your children. And godfather. I can't be all three at once. I can only be two.
Yeah. Stop looking at me.
No, but what I'm saying is that sort of, you know, gentle parenting, this sort of style of parenting wherein you're not sort of authoritarian rather. You don't sort of attribute the child's bad behavior to the child being a bad person. You attribute it to them not understanding how to regulate themselves because their brain isn't fully developed yet. And so what you do is you treat them with respect and you help guide them into making better choices and being able to self-regulate and self-soothe and all of these things, right? And that sort of view of people not being inherently just bad and terrible, but instead, you know, having to like dealing with other issues that are causing this same sort of outcome. You know, that is what I feel like we're moving a little bit more towards as a society now. Of course, there are still people out there that are saying like, you know, oh well, ADHD is just a label that people want as an excuse, and it's like, no, dude. Sometimes I can sit for 10 hours staring at a wall, doing absolutely nothing, and trying with every fiber of my being to move just a finger, and it doesn't work.
I saw a great analogy for this recently, which was like, if you are standing next to the stove and the fire is on the stove, and I go, Corey, put your hand on the stove.
Well, I don't want to put my hand on the stove.
But you could put your hand on the stove, right?
I mean, I suppose that theoretically I could place my hand upon the stove, but I'm not going to do that.
But you could move your muscles in the direction of the stove, surely.
Yes, technically I could place my hand entirely on the stove, but look, if I was to do... Ow! Hot. But I don't want to do that.
Well, but the point is that you wouldn't even really... If you knew
you wouldn't be able... Yeah, you wouldn't be able to... Yeah, no,
right?
exactly.
And so that's the same exact experience of having ADHD and trying to do something that you know you're supposed to be doing, is it's like that, like, I know exactly how to do this. I could move my muscles in the way that I need to, and yet there's a block there that I can't get around.
Yeah, and this was something that as a kid, I specifically, when I've said this on the podcast before, but when I was a kid, I would get out of the shower and I would sit on my bed in a towel, and then I would be there for perhaps hours on end. And I remember lying in my bed at one point and wanting to get up, maybe to go to the toilet or something, I don't know, but just wanting to get up. And I was willing my arm to move, and it wouldn't. And I thought, isn't that strange? That this is a common human experience, that wanting to move and moving and really thinking really hard about moving, they're just not the same thing.
Yeah.
And then it turns out, no, that's not a common human experience. It's me having executive dysfunction and not being able to translate sort of the sort of signal
intention,
of, you know, I want to move my arm to get up and do it. Like it's so difficult to explain that. But again, this is kind of different from procrastination. We're kind of veering off into ADHD.
Yes.
No, we'll get to that later on in the episode. Don't you worry. But what I was kind of saying is that this sort of view of laziness as a concept, I think, is really outdated, because laziness can, it can be better explained by so many other things, in the same sense as, criminality, right? The sort of more, people that are viewing the evidence and actually taking it in seem to be moving more towards a model of there not being a sort of necessarily inherent criminality within people, so much as circumstances being very, very, very influential on that. For example, what's the biggest indicator for crime, Luke?
So I'd imagine financial circumstance, which then itself, if you don't look at the data particularly well, correlates with race,
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Sorry, when I say unfortunately, I mean...
No, not for you. Very fortunately for you.
We need to fix that, and it's not the race that's causing it. That's what I'm getting at.
Unfortunate. Who could have done it? Your people, Luke, and my people. I'm white too. We're both the problem. No. Yeah, exactly. My point is that we look at criminality and we think, oh well, why are black people committing crimes at a higher rate than other people? Because they're poorer at a higher rate than other people. And poor people, why do they commit crimes? Are they just inherently criminal? No, because we need money to live in this system. And if you have less money, you're going to be more willing to do things that are not so good in order to survive, right? That is the absolute most basic way of looking at it. Mm-hmm. There's also factors as well, like malnutrition or lack of education or like sort of lower income resulting in generally poorer life circumstances, which can then result in emotional difficulties with regulating oneself and whatnot, right? So it's more multifaceted than I'm making out in that very short bit there. But the point is that this idea of sort of inherent criminality, if we just scratch at that surface a little bit, immediately you see, oh, wait, no, it's just poverty. That's what it is we're looking at. And I think the same thing is the case with, laziness often. We want to attribute, and I'm not saying people can't be lazy, Sure, we can look at this sort of behavior and be like, okay, we're going to call this lazy when someone knows that they could do a sort of a better job than they are doing. And the only thing that's stopping them from doing that better job is that they can't really be bothered. And yes, there could be the explanation that they're tired from XYZ, or, they don't have capacity to do this. But, we can say within this narrow window, we'll call this laziness. This is the acceptable level of being exhausted. And if you can't do stuff, when you're that exhausted, that's fine. But if you're less exhausted than that and you don't do stuff, we'll call that lazy, right? Fine, whatever. I'm not trying to outlaw laziness as a concept. I'm just saying most of the things we call lazy are probably better explained by other things, like procrastination. So back to procrastination and, the sort of causes of it. I've got a quote here. A lot of this is going to be from Professor Fuchsia Sirwa, who studied procrastination for 20 years. A lot of these papers are from her, and also a few others that I may mention throughout this. But she has said in an article for BBC Science Focus, she said, there hasn't been any convincing scientific evidence to say procrastination is the result of poor time management, but we can easily say it's all to do with mood management. At its core, procrastination is about not being able to manage your moods and emotions. Although many think impulsivity and self-control are the problems, and they do play a factor, underneath is a poor emotional response. And I think that's really important, because what's been bothering me recently is I've been on TikTok. That's a problem.
That bothers me too.
Yeah.
You should get off TikTok.
Oh, mate. Oh, no. But what I've been seeing on TikTok, I for some reason, I spent a little bit of time watching someone debunk a life coach or something, right? Or an ADHD coach. And so suddenly, of course, what TikTok is showing me is a bunch of life coaches. And here's a fun fact, by the way. Anyone can call themselves a coach. Do you know how I know? Because I'm a coach. I've just decided now. What I do is I coach people in how to be the best possible coach. For example,
I want to be a life coach.
You want to be a life coach?
Can you coach me?
I'm coaching
Thanks,
you right
coach.
now. Now you just need to give me £100 for my 15-week seminar that is entirely online, and you can only get it for that 15 weeks. Just give me the £100 now.
Okay.
There we go. Cool. There's your coaching lessons. Go, and I don't give a shit anymore. But don't inherently trust coaches. I'm not saying you should mistrust all coaches, but people call themselves a life coach or an ADHD coach, things like that. The reason they have to use those words is because those words aren't regulated. And so they can just call themselves that if they want, and there's no credentials that they need to have for that. But what I'm saying is that there are coaches and there are people who do sort of, inspirational, motivational podcasts and whatnot. A lot like what we do, actually. Like, we're a motivational podcast. We sit around and talk about how our lives are really great because all of the things that we do, and we don't take into account any of the other circumstances that are happening. No. What I'm saying is that people that do sort of inspirational, motivational podcasts and these coaches, a lot of times what you'll hear them saying is, oh, you just need to change your habits around time management. You need to improve your time management skills, and you need to improve sort of these other skills. And ultimately, that's not necessarily going to solve the problem, right? Because I can be very good at time management, actually, despite having ADHD, despite in some cases being kind of time blind, despite, really like doing things at the last minute. In the right scenarios, I can manage time quite well. It's not that difficult, but that's not my issue when it comes to being late with things or, struggling to get work done. It's not that I can't manage my time well. It's that I can't then stick to that because I have issues with actually doing things when I want to do them. But, so it's just something to bear in mind that, if procrastination is more about mood control and emotional control, the solution of improving your time management isn't necessarily going to help that. And Professor Fuchsia Sirwa also went on to say, the primacy of short-term mood repair over the longer-term pursuit of intended actions. That's what sort of procrastination is. It's prioritizing short-term mood repair over the longer-term pursuit of intended actions. Essentially what that's saying is, I'm going to do what I need to do now to make myself feel better, and I'm kind of just not going to think about what this is going to do in the long term. Short term over long term thinking, basically. And a lot of it's to do with stress, right? And as we know, when we're stressed, a part of your brain that starts getting really active is
the amygdala.
Well done, yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of activates the fight or flight response, right? And people, apparently, chronic procrastinators tend to have larger grey matter volume in the amygdala. So their amygdala is essentially, just think of it as their amygdala is sort of more active, right?
Beefy.
More beefy. Big, beefy, big, strong amygdala, right? And so that would mean that your amygdala, you're going to be more sensitive to, negative consequences of your actions. And then you have more negative emotions, potentially, and then, therefore, more procrastination, right? So that's one sort of underlying sort of cause of procrastination. There's another thing as well I want to talk about really briefly, is temporal thinking. What do you think I'm talking about here?
Well, I'm guessing you're thinking about time, like thinking about spans of time?
Kind of, yeah. More specifically, thinking about yourself over time. So thinking about how you view your current self in comparison to your future self.
Yeah.
How do you think people are at sort of empathizing, let's say, with their future selves?
Yes, because this I found fascinating, because we always think about empathy as like empathizing with other people, and probably empathizing with other people, maybe future versions of them, but definitely present versions of them. But then I was reading somewhere about how if you have lower empathy, that can also be, you can be unsuccessful in certain ways because you don't empathize with your own future self. Like you're like, that's not me, that's future me. That's a problem for future Homer, right? So that's fascinating. And I think that is that kind of where you're getting at, is that if you don't empathize with your future self, you'll prioritize your present moment self.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not just empathizing with your future self. It's the connection you have between you and your future self, right? That continuity of self. So people are really generally pretty terrible, just bad at seeing the future version of themselves as themselves, right?
Yeah.
Which to me makes a little bit of sense, because the future version of me is very different from who I am now. Like, I'm very different from who I was, even a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So future me is going to be a different person, but it's still going to be me. And it's still going to be the same conscious experience, that I'm having, even if I'm slightly different as a person. So I should be able to connect with myself more. But, under fMRI scans, we found out that apparently it seems as though you treat your future self similarly to how you treat a stranger. And okay, so I'm gonna clarify there. What we've actually found is that the sections of your brain that light up when processing information about strangers light up when you're processing information about your future self, yourself in the future, right? So, I mean, does that necessarily mean that we see future self, we sort of treat the future version of ourselves kind of like a stranger? Maybe, maybe not, but the same parts of the brain light up when we're talking about, when we're, processing information about our future self when compared to sort of a stranger. So I've got another quote here from Professor Fuchsia Sirwa. This is important, as if you perceive your future self this way, then it's easier to do something that might harm that person, leaving them a huge task rather than doing it yourself now. As your future self might feel psychologically distant to you now, you might also see them as kind of a superhero. You might say, future me will have all the ideas because they'll be well rested, or future me won't have writer's block. However, the truth is that we don't really change that much in a short period of time. And I'm going to be honest, I know that feeling oh so well, where I'm like, oh God, you know what? It's like 2, 3 a.m. I may as well just try and sleep for a couple hours and then wake up early in the morning and I'll get it done. I do not get it done early in the morning. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I'll be able to solve this after a few hours sleep. And I'm the same person a few hours later, just a few hours more well rested.
So I'm guessing this is why, so my wife is like one of the nicest people I've ever met, and she will like preference the feelings of people she doesn't know and might not even know exist yet over her own feelings. She'll be like cruel to herself and preference like strangers over herself, right? Which is so lovely. But she's also like that to future her. Like, she treats future her so well, sometimes to the detriment of present her. So this sounds like this is why, or like this is a good model as to why.
It does sound like that.
Does this mean you could kind of predict how you could potentially predict success for people by how they treat strangers? Because if you look after future self, that's essentially almost a form of, now I'm extrapolating massively here, but it's almost a form of like delayed gratification, right?
Yeah. I mean, my one issue with that would be that there are so many other factors that come into success, and also so many other factors that come into how you treat strangers.
Sorry, yes. I'm only going off the fact that when there was that study, did I tell you about this study? There's this study, very famous study with kids, where they like gave them a marshmallow, shut the door, and then said, if you don't eat the marshmallow, you come back and you'll have 2 marshmallows, right? And weirdly, the kid who was like the best at that went on to be Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube. Weird glitch in the matrix there. But like that also predicted success in the future.
I'm
quite well.
So sorry,
oh God,
Luke.
No.
I was, you know what actually happened? Whilst I was looking at this Science Focus article, the BBC article, I just clicked one of them that said 6 or 8 psychology myths that are still about, and that was there. It was literally one of the first ones that, the marshmallow test doesn't predict for success. And unfortunately as well, I'm so sorry to bring this up, but there was
no.
there was another thing that you'd mentioned on the podcast that was there. And I'm just gonna check to see what it was, because I would never have brought it up. But the fact that you've said it,
roast me. It's so good Corey's here to fact check my bullshit.
It was when you said that oxytocin is the cuddle hormone. And to be fair, I think we were right about this, because you did say that it was more than just the cuddle hormone, right?
It's like mediates your in-group, out-group mentality and like that kind of thing.
Okay, good. Then I take it back. It's not at all a correction. You were absolutely spot on.
Hey!
That's good.
But wait, I did call it the cuddle hormone.
Yeah.
Because that is what people call it.
That's what people call it. But it's not just the cuddle. So it's fine. It's just, I just saw that there.
Bonding and stuff, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also, we've said before as well that depression is due to a chemical imbalance. But we've also said, I mean, I say we, you specifically have also brought up that you just chuck serotonin, decrease serotonin in people, and that doesn't give them depression. So we don't know that it's a lack of, it's a chemical imbalance that causes depression. We just know that pumping in certain chemicals into the brain that helps that problem.
Yeah.
But the sort of the thing that it says here is that, putting painkillers into you stops the pain from a headache. That doesn't mean that a lack of painkillers is causing the headache. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's beside the point.
I survived a double correction. That was, I can breathe easy.
Let's bring it back to procrastination, right? So we've kind of got over the idea that it's kind of less due to time management skills and more down to sort of emotional, sort of dealing with emotions and how you sort of view yourself now compared to how you sort of empathize with yourself in the future, right? If you're not great at empathizing with yourself in the future, if you don't see a sort of huge continuity between yourself and your future self, or if you're not very good at being like, oh yeah, I should do this thing for my future self, then you're probably going to be more likely to procrastinate. But also because of the emotional stuff that we were speaking about there, procrastination can cause like a lot of really guilty feelings in you, which can make it more likely that you're going to procrastinate as well. And I want to talk about the effects of procrastination because, again, people talk about this just being laziness. But if it was just laziness, then you wouldn't expect to see people, having all of these sort of outcomes from it. So, again, another quote from Professor Fuchsia Sirwa. Again, and I'll say this is because this BBC Science Focus article was brilliant. It is not all that I've got in this episode, but it's so much of this episode comes from that because it was a great backbone to build from. So if you go and read that article, it's very, very good. And there's like pretty much all of the information from it is in this episode, but we've also got a little bit more from other places too. So it's not exactly plagiarism. It's just almost plagiarism.
You've plagiarized more than one person, so it's fine.
Whoa! That's what creating an original idea is, Luke. You think Star Wars isn't just like a bunch of things that are in old films put into space? Of course it is. Ding-a-ling-ling, is that the ad bell again?
Goodness me, he doth be ringing greatly today.
And I'll tell you what he's ringing for, Luke, and I'm sure you can guess. It's SCI GUYS Live.
It's SCI GUYS Live in London on the 26th of September.
Are you going to be interrupting me this much all the time?
Yes, I am. You said I could guess, and I did.
Well, we're coming back to check to see if you've got your tickets for SCI GUYS Live in London. We told you about it earlier, but let's tell you again. We've got a live podcast, a Q&A, a meet and greet, a quick-fire quiz, and also a special guest, Chanel Williams.
Wow, I really want to see your tiny faces looking back at us as we record the podcast live, so get your tickets now at sciguys.co.uk/tickets.
That's sciguys.co.uk/tickets, and if you're a patron, you can get 20% off. Ooh.
You can even become a patron for £1 and get 20% off now if you want.
Don't tell them that.
You can. Keep your money, don't give it to us.
Oh no! What a deal! Well, you have to come now, and let's get back to the show. People who chronically procrastinate, people who make it a habit, have higher levels of stress and a greater number of acute health problems. They're more likely to have headaches or insomnia or digestive issues, and they're more susceptible to the flu and colds. So basically, what they found is that procrastination can lead to a lot of different health problems. And it seems that the primary sort of mechanism of this is stress. Stress is not good. Stress is bad. Stress can decrease your life expectancy. People deal with stress a lot, and I don't think we really consider truly how detrimental stress is to our health. But yeah. So it's not just sort of stress, but also if you procrastinate things, you might procrastinate healthy things. So, for example, going to the gym. Oh, I don't really feel it today, and I know it was my goal to get sort of fitter or healthier and like be more active, but I'll do it tomorrow because I'm not feeling it today. There you go. And then suddenly you're not being as active as you could be, and so you're maybe not going to be as healthy as you could be. Same with going to the doctor or going to the dentist. People can just procrastinate that and not do it, and then they can have worse health outcomes.
I need to go to the dentist. Thank you for reminding me.
I need to go to the dentist too. I so need to go to the dentist. But no, back to sort of procrastination as well. There's lower self-esteem, lack of household safety behaviors, it says as well, which is checking to see if the fire alarm is working. I've not done that, I think, once in this house.
Now if you like, it's right there.
I don't want to. I have to stand up.
That's a problem for Feature Corey.
Look, if it's a problem for Feature Corey, he's going to be either horribly burned to death or fine. Those are the two outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. But yeah, procrastination can also result in you performing worse as a student. So worse in school or university, or in grad school if you're an American. And then that could result in earning less money, or it says having jobs with lesser perceived value to them. So, it can have very wide-ranging effects, more than you would actually think. And I kind of want to point out something here that's just a disclaimer for anyone that's listening. If you think that you're a procrastinator and, but I do my best work at the last minute. So it says here that students may actually think that they get a thrill out of delaying their work and believe they work best under pressure. So that's not borne out in experimental data. This is from Joseph Ferrari, who is a psychology professor at DePaul University. Goes on to say several studies in a meta-analysis from 2007 suggest procrastination is negatively related to overall GPA, final exam scores, and assignment grades. Students seem to remember the one time that maybe waiting till the last minute did pay off with a good grade, but they forget the other 9 times when it didn't. Again, Dr. Joseph Ferrari, and this quote specifically is from Procrastination or Intentional Delay, a 2010 article from the APA. So yeah, if you think that you are procrastinating is how you get your best work done, probably not.
I wonder how many people are procrastinating listening to us right now.
Oh my God, loads.
Stick some headphones in, mate. Do the thing you need to do. You can stay with us. We're here for you.
Make sure you listen to the end of this episode.
Yeah.
And share it.
And like it and send it to your friends and subscribe.
Yeah.
And join our Patreon.
And then you can get your work done. Once you've done all of that, then you can get your stuff done. In fact, if you want to procrastinate even more, you could just go to leave a review on Apple, leave a little comment.
Yeah.
Lots of little tasks for you to do before you get to the big task.
Of sorting your life out.
And speaking of sorting one's life out, let's talk about active procrastinators. Because there is this concept of active procrastinators. What do you think that might be?
Is that someone who is procrastinating and they fully know that they are procrastinating and they don't do anything about it?
Not exactly. It's more people that procrastinate but do well. They intentionally leave stuff till later because it's kind of part of their process and it has better outcomes for them. And it actually does have better outcomes for them, not just, perceived better outcomes. But the issue with that is that there's a bit of contention there because, I think quite a few people that sort of study this are saying, well, actually, really, if it's an intentional delay, if you're intentionally putting something off,
it's not procrastinating.
It's not procrastination, right? Like it's not sort of, doing other things to avoid doing the work that you want to do. It's leaving it to a time where it is what we were saying earlier on, right? Leaving it to a time where it's more convenient to do it. Now, procrastination is pretty specifically, and when I say voluntary, I mean as in I'm not working because something else is making me not work. I could be working, but I'm doing something else. So like sort of voluntarily avoiding a task, right? That is necessary. And if you're putting it off to do it later and you have a plan to do it late, that's not really sort of putting it off, right? That's making a plan and doing it when you plan to do it. So it's kind of a different thing there. So basically a researcher has said delay and procrastination are not the same things. Let's not confuse deliberate, thoughtful delay of action with the lack of self-regulatory ability known as procrastination, right? Like that's like saying, oh man, I have autism. So I've got so much autism. Sometimes I just choose to ignore social cues. I just choose to ignore them when I feel like I want to ignore them. Oh, but so do you have like any difficulty like understanding them? Is it like intuitive? No, I intuitively understand social norms and cues and whatnot, and didn't have to actively learn them. I don't mask or anything. I just sometimes choose to ignore them. It's not autism. It's not what that is.
That's what my doctor was accusing me of being.
Oh my God.
I found it helpful in life to pretend to be autistic.
No, yeah, exactly, right? We got to draw sort of a line between people that actively do something because it's beneficial to them and people that do something that is detrimental to them and they can't help but do it, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the difference between a disorder and just a guy, just a guy doing stuff.
The guy with an odd strategy.
Exactly. An out of the box sort of strategy, right? So if we want to talk about managing procrastination, right? So we've gone through pretty much everything to do with it. We've gone through, what causes it, and what it is, and what it isn't as well, a number of things. But managing it, there are a few sort of quick fixes that are kind of spoken about, trying to think of things as 48 hours instead of 2 days, or it's gonna be 7 days, 14 days instead of a week or 2 weeks, right? That's apparently one way that can help by breaking that time down. It makes it feel a bit more immediate. Useless to these. I feel like this is where we can kind of draw the line between ADHD and procrastination. I feel like if that kind of stuff is really, really helping you, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be ADHD. Again, don't take this as a diagnosis, speak to a professional and all of that sort of stuff. But what I mean is that I think with people with ADHD, what it tends to be is a case of the deadline coming up creates a sudden spark of anxiety that then provides that sort of activation energy to do the task. So like breaking it, saying, oh, it's going to be 7 days instead of a week, or 48 hours instead of 2 days. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily going to help.
Well, the only thing I wonder though is that if 7 days intuitively feels like a shorter amount of time, that might create bring forward the activation energy.
It might do.
Yeah.
It might do, but it might not also. Yeah. It's I don't know. And again, this is not me saying the test for ADHD is whether this worked or doesn't. I'm just saying that's what I reckon. All right, that's what I reckon. So take it with the biggest, as much salt as you can hold, really. But yeah, no, there are better ways of sort of reducing procrastination, and this again comes from Sirwa, Dr. Sirwa, Professor Sirwa. She said, I think people don't realize that procrastinators, especially chronic procrastinators, are extremely hard on themselves before and after the task. And rather than getting on with the job, they just go round and round spinning their wheels. So my advice is to not go full in over identifying and becoming that frustration. Step back from it for a minute and just acknowledge that you're not happy with yourself and then move forward. It's basically about recognizing that everyone screws up. You're not the first person to procrastinate, nor will you be the last. Welcome to the human race. So, I mean, essentially, and there's some data that kind of supports this as well. Apparently, just being more compassionate with yourself and even sort of practicing mindfulness can help with procrastination, right? So if you're more compassionate with yourself, you're not going to feel as bad and have all those negative feelings on you. And if the negative feelings are the cause of the procrastination, because you want to solve those negative feelings by doing other stuff rather than doing the thing that is going to long-term solve those negative feelings, right? Then you're probably going to be more likely to do the thing rather than avoid it by doing other stuff.
Yeah, it's like a way of interrupting that kind of like death spiral of like, I'm procrastinating, so I'm stressed, so I'm stressed, so I'm sad, and I'm sad, so I'm procrastinating, so I'm procrastinating, so I'm stressed.
Exactly, yeah.
Forever and ever and ever and ever.
Yeah, and if you just get in there and practice some mindfulness and sort of, as I said, sort of self-compassion, then you can be like, okay, well, I'm feeling stressed and I'm feeling sad because I'm not getting this thing done, and I'm going to do this thing instead of doing that. Well, if you get in there first and be like, okay, you know what? Yeah, look, I've left this a little bit late, and that's not great. It's a bit stressful right now, but that's okay. And you know what? I'll probably feel better. Like if I'm really like thinking in myself, like, what is this feeling I've got? This is the feeling that I have. And what is the best way to solve this? Is it really to not do anything or to do something else?
Yeah.
Or is it to do the thing? Like, and yeah, it's going to be difficult, but that's probably a better way to deal with that, right? And again, with ADHD, for kind of drawing differences there, that could help with ADHD, yeah, but when you've got that sort of executive dysfunction, like incapable of moving or doing something, potentially because of, people say, like a dopamine deficiency, or because you're some issue with sort of the dopamine reward system within your brain, right? And again, I'm not saying that as a concrete fact, I'm just kind of saying broadly that's what people generally point towards. If that's the issue there, that's slightly different, right, than feeling bad about yourself and doing something to feel good instead of the thing that is, that's necessary but not going to make you feel good in the moment, right? Because that's kind of the key point there, right? With ADHD, it's not really a case of sort of, I don't want to do that thing, so I'm going to do something else. It's more a case of, I want to do that thing and I'm physically incapable of doing it. Why can't I do it? I've been sitting here staring at the screen for 2 hours and I've not been, like, I've typed 3 words because that's all I can muster up, because it's taking so much energy to just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if it's not enjoyable enough to you, you just don't get that drive to keep on doing it. It's like an active, I've kind of said this to people before, it's like, if I'm doing something that isn't capturing my attention, or it's really difficult to get lost in it. So it's a constant effort to do it. I have to constantly be putting in the effort to be researching this rather than just kind of like getting into it. If you're not really feeling a book, it's a constant effort of having to like read the book. And like, I've done that before. Like, it's really, really annoying if there's a book that I want to read, but I'm kind of on the train and there's distractions around me and I'm not super feeling the book. It's a massive, massive effort to read the book on its own. And then you add in other distractions and it's bloody impossible, right? So there are differences between these two things. We'll get into them more in just a sec. But mindfulness can help. Apparently there's also an unpublished study. I think that was unpublished this year. So it may be published by the time this episode comes out. It may not be. But you, again, check that BBC Science Focus article. That'll give you an idea of where you can find it if and when it comes out. Or not if and when it comes out. If it's out by the time that this episode comes out. But goes on to say sort of that this study, they basically looked at sort of, I think it was students. They looked at students. They split them up into different groups. One group was told, think about happy things when you're doing activities. So like, think, it literally says, think watching videos of kittens, right? And another group were asked to reframe the upcoming task as something meaningful, pondering questions such as, how will completing this goal be valuable in how you see yourself? How will completing this goal be valuable in how others see you? How will completing this goal be valuable to my personal growth? And apparently, if you look at them over the next few days, the second group procrastinated less than the first group. So just thinking happy thoughts and sort of engaging in things that make you sort of think happy thoughts, like watching videos of kittens, is less effective than sort of being mindful and thinking, okay, well, what is this going to do for me? Like really sort of like therapizing yourself almost, being like, what is the benefit of this for me? Why is doing this a good thing for me?
Yeah.
That sort of thinking, the latter one, is apparently more effective at curbing procrastination.
Yeah, it reminds me of something I was reading about recently, where there were two groups that were put in front of a race, like a racetrack, right? And they were split into these two groups, and one was told to just spend a while staring at the finish line. And that's all they were told to do, just stare at the finish line. And the other group were told, like, do some warm-up stretches. And the group that's just stared at the finish line finished the race faster than the group that did warm-up stretches.
Wow,
right?
Really?
Which is properly insane. And that was all about sort of task visualization and like visualizing. Like now, the specific thing I was reading about was about drawing the distinction between one thing, which I think is a sort of in the manifestation community, which is like thinking about the feelings that you will have when you achieve the thing. And it was specifically saying that actually has a negative effect on motivation, which is exactly what you're saying here with the happy kittens, right? You're thinking about happy thoughts. And if you're like, well, if I'm already happy, then why would I try to achieve this thing? Because I'm happy now. And if you try to positively visualize, like, oh, imagine I have £1 million, and you try and feel good about having £1 million, then you're not sort of motivating yourself towards the £1 million. You're just already feeling good in the present. Whereas if you stare at the goal, in this case being like, how will I feel? How will this thing I'm doing be good for my personal growth? You actually get to the goal quicker, which I thought was a really interesting distinction.
That is interesting. Yeah, no, it's very cool how our brains kind of work, right? That manifesting kind of does work, and I feel like people look down on manifesting and sort of all of these sorts of things, and in a lot of cases for good reason, because some of the things that people come away with are just they're empirically sort of false, right? But there is something to be said, as we spoke about in our Wicca episode, that, or the Science of Witchcraft, the Science of Wicca, I cannot recall exactly which one it was quite some time ago, but as we discussed in that episode, yeah, the sort of cognitive biases that one has, and even if that's optimism bias or confirmation bias, or just these sort of like the little sort of shortcuts that your brain uses essentially to interact with the world, you can kind of hack into those and create a better subjective experience for yourself. And not only that, right, you've also got things like the placebo effect, because creating a better subjective experience for yourself can, like in your brain, can then influence your body, because your brain is connected to your body. And if your brain's like, oh man, this drug's supposed to be helping me not feel pain, suddenly you can feel less pain because your brain thinks it's supposed to be feeling less pain. And I'm not going to pretend to, be able to understand or describe the sort of mechanism of that. And I'm pretty sure it's because we don't actually know it. But it's really interesting to see how just mindset can affect so much. Now, again, we're not one of those motivational podcasts, so we're not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, man, mindset is everything. Actually, that study proves that, like, you just got to focus on the goal, bro. You just got to focus on the goal and you'll meet it. No, there are other circumstances. Obviously, of course. There are so many different factors at play there. But what we do know is that sort of visualization, sort of planning ahead and like really thinking about that can help you get stuff done. And I will say, I don't disagree with your interpretation. It's a fantastic interpretation. I do just want to clarify for anyone listening that is not inherently and sort of unequivocally the conclusion that should be drawn from that data, right? You know what I mean? Like, as in that is a seemingly valid conclusion based on the information that you've got now, but also there's a lot of inference there, and I don't want people coming away from it thinking that that's exactly what the study said, but I do agree with you.
Yes, exactly. I absolutely agree. And I just want to quickly draw a distinction as well of what I was getting at there was about the difference between focusing on a goal and focusing on the goal in the way that your study was talking about, of like, what I want to get there, but I'm not currently there. Whereas there's also this idea in manifestation community of like, just feel how it will feel to achieve your goal. And that actually has a detrimental effect on motivation, because if you already feel good in the present, why are you moving towards the thing where you'll feel good there too?
Yeah. Dress for the job you want, not for the job you have sort of mentality,
Sure.
That sort of thing. Or like, do the work of the job that you want, not the job that you have. No, that's called exploitation.
That is called exploitation.
That's called, that's exploitation of the workers, I think. No, but yeah, absolutely agree with you. It's more about sort of focusing on a goal and how you're going to get there than it is about just acting like you're already there, right? But yeah, no, getting back to this, it goes on to say that it's about reappraising, seeing something as more meaningful, and when you create meaning, you create a connection to the task. Finding meaning in the task, whether it's in relation to yourself or other people, is really, really powerful, and it's a great way to start that reappraisal process and dial down some of those negative emotions, or at least make them more manageable. And personally, I feel like that can be helpful, but my experience of ADHD, that's not all, like, being connected to the task doesn't help necessarily.
That's like mindfulness though, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, what I mean is though, it's saying here that once you create a connection to the task and finding meaning in the task, then it becomes, it's really powerful. And what I'm saying here is, yeah, I'm sure it is. For me, SCI GUYS is my job, and also a thing that I really enjoy doing, and also like the thing that I probably spend most of my, I can't even say free time because it is technically my job. All my time is free time, Luke.
That's being self-employed.
That's being a podcaster.
It's all free time, and also none of it is.
No, not a single moment. No, but yeah, even though there's so much meaning to me with SCI GUYS, and I can read comments to procrastinate doing an episode. I'm like, I'll do some comment moderation, and I can see some comments. I'm like, oh man, that really means a lot to me. This is really important. Like, SCI GUYS, it's doing good stuff. I feel really good about it. Can't do it though. Still can't do it. I kind of want to draw more of a distinction between ADHD and procrastination, because everyone procrastinates to some degree, but ADHD is a lot more than just putting things off because you don't feel like doing them. And yes, people with ADHD do procrastinate, and probably do procrastinate more than the average person. And do you know what? If we're being perfectly honest, I've not read all of these studies, but there's a decent chance that some of these people may have undiagnosed or perhaps even diagnosed ADHD. Although you'd probably want to root the ADHD people out from your study. As we know, ADHD is really underdiagnosed. So yeah, some of those people could just have ADHD. But again, as I said, there are other things that come along with ADHD. Lots of other things there. We've done a bunch of episodes on ADHD, so go and check those out. There's not much point of us wasting your time time listing all of those now. But what I do want to talk about a little bit is executive dysfunction. We kind of brought that up a little bit already. Do you know what executive functions or executive dysfunction is, Luke?
I guess it's the ability to decide to do something and then it actually happens.
That is part of it, I guess, but it's actually a much broader concept than that. And I'm glad that we can kind of bring it up and talk about it, because it's one of those things that people talk about so much on TikTok and online, being like, oh, executive function this and executive function that, without actually knowing what it specifically is. And your idea of executive function was my idea of executive function until I sort of looked into it and found out that there's a lot more to it than what people kind of present online. But honestly, this is kind of the issue for me, that from what people present online, that interpretation is all you can glean from what people are saying. But it's a bit deeper than that. So it's about a few different cognitive abilities that it says here that enable and drive adaptive goal-oriented behavior. So that is from Executive Dysfunction 2015 in Behavioral Neurology and Neuropsychiatry, I believe. And basically, it's a few different things. So generating thought and thinking flexibly, updating and manipulating information mentally, a bunch of different things. So there's actually a much better list I've got just after that from Executive Functions by Dal Diamond. So it says executive functions make possible mentally playing with ideas, taking the time to think before acting, meeting novel, unanticipated challenges, resisting temptations, and staying focused. Core executive functions are inhibition, so response inhibition, that's like self-control, resisting temptations and resisting acting impulsively, and interference control, selective attention, and cognitive inhibition. So, basically directing your attention to something. Working memory and cognitive flexibility, so that's thinking outside of the box, maybe like not having sort of like strict black and white thinking, and maybe thinking something that's maybe a little bit more out of left field, and working with information that way. And then there's as cognitive flexibility, and seeing things from different perspectives, that also falls under cognitive flexibility, and quickly and flexibly adapting to changed circumstances. So what you might have gathered there is that executive functions are a lot more than just not being able to do things that you want to do. But if I'm sort of looking at this, because we've done so much reading on ADHD and autism, we've done a lot of that for this podcast. I mean, I've done the reading, you've been listening to my reading. But is there anything that you can kind of pick up from what I've said there in relation to those two sort of things?
No.
That's okay, because I'll tell you now. So what I kind of spotted there is that a couple of these seem to be very sort of ADHD related traits, right? So self-control, resisting temptations, and resisting acting impulsively. So response inhibition, right? Inhibition, that executive function. People with ADHD tend to not be necessarily great at inhibition, like not being impulsive, that sort of stuff, but also resisting temptations, can be not great at that more often than, say, the average person, right? But then interference control as well, which is selective attention, right? That's something that's really difficult for people with ADHD as well. And then if we look at the sort of cognitive flexibility and also working memory, people with ADHD sucks.
No working memory.
It's like out of your brain, right? Or maybe good work. This is not a universal thing, right? But it's just based on the experiences of a bunch of people with ADHD that I've seen. These seem to be the case, and also this is kind of borne out in the diagnostic criteria.
2 megabytes of RAM. Sorry, interrupted you there.
Don't worry. And then if we look at cognitive flexibility, which is seeing things from different perspectives and quickly and flexibly adapting to changed circumstances.
That's autism.
Autistic people can struggle with that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so people, talk about executive function and executive dysfunction, but it's not just ADHD. I mean, there's also neurodegenerative conditions as well. Like, so Alzheimer's and whatnot starts to affect your executive functions. So that can also be seen as an executive dysfunction disorder or issue, right? And so if we look at procrastination, it kind of begs the question, is it an executive dysfunction issue, right? And I've actually got a paper here for it, Procrastination as Evidence of Executive Function Impairment in College Students. That's from 2021. I think that's in Applied Neuropsychology. Adult is the paper. So what that says is that there have been a couple studies that point to executive functioning issues in people that sort of self-report high levels of procrastination, which is interesting. So it could be related to executive function. But then it also, as we've said, self-reported, if they're not sort of sort of weeding out people that have ADHD, you could be seeing undiagnosed ADHD as well, and so that could be a part to play as well. Especially because this is self-reported. The scales are going to be kind of difficult, right? My 6 procrastination could be someone else's 10 procrastination. It's not necessarily going to be as easy to sort of make that super comparable. Obviously, they do make efforts to do it, and there are more standardized ways of doing it, but still, it's not going to be 100% sort of accurate necessarily. It can still be pretty accurate, but not necessarily as accurate as it could be.
It also may well be that procrastination is like diarrhea.
Yeah, there's different causes.
In that it's a symptom of lots of things. Maybe you need therapy. Maybe you need ADHD medication. Maybe you need something else.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Right. And it could be that these executive functioning difficulties are caused by those negative emotions, right? And it's the thing is that there are lots of different things that can affect executive function, right? So if you can see a sort of deficits in the executive function with a number of things, like being stressed or sad or lonely or sleep deprived or not physically fit. You can also see it in autism, as I've said, in neurodegenerative disorders, in ADHD. There are many things that can affect executive function. And I just want to really, really be clear here that procrastinating does not mean that you have ADHD, and procrastination and ADHD are not necessarily the same thing. In fact, they're probably not the same thing because there's so many other things that come along with ADHD that not all procrastinators necessarily experience, right? But my point is that even if procrastination is down to some kind of executive functioning issue, that doesn't mean necessarily, again, that it is ADHD. And there, as you've said, there could be many, many different sort of causes for procrastination. Like, it does seem to be that this sort of emotional situation is the kind of like underlying cause based on the sort of research that we've got right now. But we've already spoken about the limitations of the current sort of literature. So, we don't super know. And I was kind of curious going into this episode because I was like, how are we going to get an episode out of procrastination? Like, have we done that much research on it? We have done a fair amount, but it's been quite focused on some areas and it's burst out into other areas and it's been evolving over the past 30 years, but there's still a long way to go. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I've got to say. That's procrastination. It's not necessarily ADHD, but bloody hell, is it an interesting topic.
You have made me realise today that there are some tasks I need to do which I have been putting off for actual years. So
good Lord.
I'm leaving now.
That's fine. I'll call ahead and tell your dentist that you're on the way. You want to do a quick fire quiz?
Yeah, let's do the quick fire quiz. Dun, 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 dun. I'll do it later edition.
So, the rules for the quick fire quiz are the same as always. I'll ask one question, Luke. That's one between you and the audience. The first person to get the answer wins. If you get it before Luke, you win. What do they win, Luke?
One more task that you need to do and won't.
Good Lord. Well, the question for you is, what percentage of adults are estimated to regularly procrastinate?
20%.
Ding, ding, ding. That
Yes.
is correct. Well done. And that is not all for us, though. It's a Patreon vote episode. Is it not? It is a Patreon vote episode. And so we need to thank all of our patrons. So why don't we do that now, Luke?
Because I don't want to. I'm going to do it later. I'll do it tomorrow.
Well, tomorrow's come bloody quick, Luke. So we're going to say thank you to Tom J.
Thank you to Meow Ceratops.
Thank you to Maggie Van Heemst.
Thanksgiving to May.
Thank you to Lytton Rata.
Thank you, Frida Svanberg.
Thank you, Danny B.
Thank you to me, Luke. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Eli Wilbur.
Thank you to Hi Hon.
A big ol' thanks to Mikamoo.
And thank you to GM Overwhelmed.
Gee, I'm overwhelmed with all of that, but it's time to go. But before we do that, we want to thank all of our patrons, old and new, and an extra special thank you to executive producers Dinito and Glitch Rabbit. And thank you for watching. You can find the full references for this episode down in the description. Subscribe for new episodes every Sunday, and why not leave us a nice wee comment? You can support the pod at patreon.com/SCI Guys, or you can find and contact us at SCI Guys Pod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and at SCI Guys on TikTok too. Or you can send us an email at sciguyspod@gmail.com.
That's sciguyspod@gmail.com. Sciguyspod@gmail.com.
You can follow me at NotCore everywhere.
You can follow me at Luke Cupforth everywhere.
I'll say bye later.
You're going to have to wait a few years for me to say bye.